The train's whistle cut through the dusty Wyoming air like a blade, and when the steam cleared, Adelaide Porter stood alone on the platform at Wheatland station with nothing but the thin cotton dress on her back and a carpet bag that held everything she owned in this world. She had been promised marriage, security, a new life in the West. Thomas Whitmore had written her such beautiful letters, painting pictures of a prosperous ranch and a future filled with hope. She had traveled all the way from Philadelphia, leaving behind her position as a schoolteacher and the only home she had ever known. Now, watching the station master avoid her eyes as he shuffled past, Adelaide realized that Thomas Whitmore was not coming. He had never intended to come. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden platform. Adelaide clutched her bag tighter, feeling the weight of curious stares from the handful of people milling about the station. A woman in a fine blue dress whispered to her companion, both of them glancing at Adelaide with poorly concealed pity. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the boards beneath her feet, but pride kept her spine straight and her chin lifted. She had $43 to her name. That was supposed to have been for her trousseau, for the wedding dress she would never wear. The station master, a grizzled man with a tobacco-stained beard, finally approached her with reluctance written all over his weathered face. "Miss, I am afraid you cannot remain here past closing time. That would be in about an hour." "I understand," Adelaide said, forcing the words through her tight throat. "Could you direct me to a respectable boarding house?" He scratched his beard, looking uncomfortable. "Well now, that might be a problem, Mrs. Henderson's place is full up with the railroad surveyors and the other establishments. They are not the kind of places a lady like yourself would want to be." Adelaide felt panic rising in her chest but refused to let it show. Surely there must be somewhere. "There is the hotel, but it runs about $2 a night and they will want payment up front for at least a week." He paused. "You got folks here in Wheatland. Someone who might be expecting you." The implication was clear. He knew she had been abandoned. The whole town probably knew. In a place this size, news traveled faster than wildfire. "Thank you for your assistance," Adelaide said stiffly, turning away before he could see the tears threatening to spill. She would not cry. Not here, not in front of these strangers who already pitied her enough. She walked down the platform steps and onto the dusty main street, her boots clicking against the wooden walkway. Wheatland was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of weathered buildings clustered along a single thoroughfare. The Rocky Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow even in late May. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like a prison. Adelaide had made it perhaps 2 blocks when she realized she had nowhere to go. She stopped in front of the general store, staring at her reflection in the window glass. 22 years old, her dark hair already coming loose from its pins, her green eyes too bright with unshed tears. A failure. That was what her aunt back in Philadelphia would call her. A foolish girl who had thrown away everything on the promises of a stranger. "You look like you could use some help, miss." The voice was deep and gentle, tinged with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or perhaps further south. Adelaide turned to find herself looking up at the tallest man she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against his worn cotton shirt. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, with lines around his blue eyes that suggested he smiled often. Right now, those eyes held nothing but concern. "I am quite all right, thank you," Adelaide lied, gripping her bag so tightly her knuckles went white. The cowboy tilted his head, his dark hair falling across his forehead. He removed his hat respectfully. "With all due respect, madam, you do not look all right. You look like you are about 2 seconds from collapsing, and there is no shame in needing help. I am Asher Quinn. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Adelaide Porter. The name came out automatically, along with the ingrained manners her mother had drilled into her. And I assure you, Mr. Quinn, I can manage. I am sure you can, he said, his tone suggesting he believed no such thing. But the fact is, it is getting on toward evening, and a lady should not be standing on the street with all her belongings. Now, I overheard some talk at the station. You were waiting for Thomas Whitmore. The shame burned through her. That is none of your concern. It is my concern when a woman is being mistreated in my town, Asher said firmly. Tom Whitmore is a low-down snake who has pulled this trick before. He advertises for brides, gets them to come all the way out here, and then never shows up. I am not sure what he gets out of it, aside from some twisted pleasure in knowing he has left women stranded. Adelaide's legs suddenly felt weak. Before, he has done this to other women, twice that I know of. Both times, the women had family they could wire for money. They got back home all right. His expression softened. You do not have family, do you? I have an aunt in Philadelphia. We are not on speaking terms. Adelaide took a shaky breath. She disapproved of my coming west. Can you wire her anyway? Explain the situation. I would rather starve. The words came out more vehement than she intended, but they were true. Her aunt had told her she was making a terrible mistake, that she would end up ruined and alone. Adelaide would not give her the satisfaction of being right. Asher was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those kind blue eyes. Then he said something that changed everything. I have a proposition for you, Miss Porter. It may seem improper, but I need you to hear me out before you make a decision. Adelaide's stomach dropped. She had heard about what happened to desperate women in frontier towns, the compromises they were forced to make. Mr. Quinn, I appreciate your concern, but I am not that kind of woman. And I am not that kind of man, he said sharply, then immediately softened his tone. I apologize. That came out harsh. What I am trying to say is this. I need a wife. A real wife, legal and proper. I have a ranch that is doing well, but I am looking to expand, and the bank will not give me the loan I need unless I can prove stability. A family man gets better terms than a bachelor. And beyond that, I am tired of living alone. I am 25 years old and I want a home, not just a house. You are proposing marriage to a complete stranger. Adelaide could not believe what she was hearing. I know it sounds crazy, Asher admitted, but think about it practically. You need a home and security. I need a wife. We are both of age and sound mind. We could help each other. You do not even know me. I could be a terrible person. I could be a criminal for all you know. Are you? No, but that is not the point. Asher smiled then, a slow, genuine smile that transformed his face. The point is that we are both in a difficult situation, and we could solve each other's problems. I am not asking you to love me, Miss Porter. I am just asking you to marry me. The absurdity of the statement made Adelaide laugh despite everything, a slightly hysterical sound that she quickly smothered. This is madness. Maybe, Asher agreed. But sometimes the maddest choices turn out to be the right ones. Look, you do not have to decide right now. Let me at least buy you dinner at the hotel. We can talk properly, get to know each other a bit. If you decide you want no part of this, I will pay for a room for the week and help you figure out your next move. No strings attached. But if you are willing to consider it, we could go see Reverend Thomas tomorrow and be married by afternoon. Every rational part of Adelaide's mind screamed that this was insane. You could not marry a man you had just met, a man you knew nothing about. It was reckless and foolish and desperate. But she was desperate, and strangely, looking into Asher Quinn's honest face, she did not feel afraid. Dinner, she heard herself say. We can have dinner and talk. The relief on his face was palpable. Thank you. You will not regret this, I promise. As they walked together toward the hotel, Adelaide wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life, or if somehow, impossibly, this stranger with kind eyes might actually be her salvation. The hotel dining room was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and oil lamps that cast a warm glow as the sun set outside. Asher held out a chair for Adelaide, and she sat gratefully, her legs still trembling from the emotional upheaval of the day. When was the last time she had eaten? Breakfast on the train, a stale biscuit with weak coffee. That felt like a lifetime ago. Asher ordered roast chicken with potatoes and vegetables for both of them, along with fresh bread and butter. When the food arrived, Adelaide had to force herself not to fall on it like a starving animal. She ate slowly, deliberately, while Asher talked. I came to Wyoming 3 years ago, he explained, cutting his chicken into neat pieces. Before that, I worked on ranches all over Texas and Colorado, saving every penny I could. When I had enough for a down payment, I bought 200 acres outside of Wheatland and built a house. Started with 50 head of cattle. Now I have got nearly 200, plus a dozen horses I am breeding for sale. That sounds like considerable success, Adelaide said, genuinely impressed. It has been hard work but satisfying. The house is nothing fancy, just 4 rooms, but it is solid. Good roof, stone fireplace, a well that has never run dry. There is a vegetable garden, though I admit I have not kept it up as well as I should. I am better with cattle than carrots. Despite herself, Adelaide smiled. I grew up helping in my mother's garden. Before she passed, we had quite a productive plot. When did you lose her? Asher's voice was gentle. 6 years ago. Fever took both my parents within a week of each other. I went to live with my aunt and found work as a schoolteacher. She paused, then decided honesty was the only way forward. I was not fleeing a terrible life, Mr. Quinn. I had a good position, a comfortable home, but I wanted something more. I wanted my own family, my own home. When Thomas wrote to me about Wyoming, about building a life together, it seemed like an answer to prayers I had not even spoken aloud. And instead, you found yourself stranded and alone, Asher finished quietly. I am truly sorry for that. Tom Whitmore deserves to be horsewhipped. What I do not understand is why he would do such a thing. What does he gain from it? Asher's jaw tightened. Some men are just cruel for the sake of cruelty. Tom inherited his father's ranch and runs it into the ground with drink and poor decisions. I think he gets some kind of pleasure out of making others as miserable as he is. They ate in silence for a few moments. Then Adelaide asked the question that had been nagging at her. Why have you not married before now? Surely there are women in Wheatland who would be happy to become the wife of a successful rancher. There are exactly 7 unmarried women in Wheatland between the ages of 18 and 40, Asher said with a wry smile. 3 of them are under 16, which rules them out entirely. One is engaged to the blacksmith. One is the banker's daughter who has made it clear she finds ranch life beneath her. And the last 2 are sisters who have already turned me down because they plan to return east to family in St. Louis. So I am a last resort. Adelaide tried to keep the hurt from her voice. No, Asher said firmly, meeting her eyes. You are an opportunity. I could wait another year, maybe 2, hoping someone suitable comes along. Or I could take a chance on someone who is intelligent, brave enough to travel halfway across the country for a new life, and who understands what hard work means. That sounds like exactly the kind of woman I would want as a partner. You know nothing about me beyond those assumptions. Then tell me about yourself. We have all evening. So Adelaide talked. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a bookkeeper and a seamstress. About learning to read before she was 5, devouring every book she could get her hands on. About the joy she found in teaching children their letters, watching their faces light up with understanding. She told him about the small apartment she had shared with her aunt, the constant criticism, the feeling of being a burden. In turn, Asher told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents had died when he was 17, a wagon accident on the way to town. The ranch had gone to his eldest brother, and Asher had struck out on his own, determined to build something that belonged only to him. "You see your brothers?" Adelaide asked. "Not often. Letters a few times a year. They have their lives, I have mine. We parted on good terms, but Texas feels like a lifetime ago now." The dining room had emptied around them. The waiter was giving them pointed looks, clearly wanting to close up for the night. Adelaide realized with surprise that she had been talking to Asher for nearly 3 hours. It had felt like minutes. "I should let you get some rest," Asher said, signaling for the bill. "You have had an exhausting day." "Mr. Quinn," Adelaide began, then corrected herself. "Asher, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "All right." "If we were to do this, if we were to marry, what would you expect from me? As your wife, I mean." Her cheeks burned, but she forced herself to continue. "I need to know what kind of arrangement this would be." Asher was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured and careful. "I would expect honesty, respect, and partnership. I would expect you to help manage the household and perhaps assist with the ranch accounts, since you mentioned you are good with figures. I would hope that we could become friends, real friends, over time. As for the other aspects of marriage, I would never force myself on you. That would only happen if and when you wanted it to, and if that day never came, then so be it. That seems an unsatisfactory arrangement for you." "I am willing to let things develop naturally," Asher said. "I believe that respect and friendship are better foundations for a marriage than passion that burns hot and fast. If we build something real, something solid, the rest may follow. And if it does not, well, at least I will have someone to talk to over dinner instead of eating alone every night." Adelaide studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden motives. She found none. Asher Quinn seemed to be exactly what he appeared to be, an honest man making an honest proposal in unusual circumstances. "I will marry you," she said, the words coming out steady and sure. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "I want to continue teaching if there is opportunity, even if it is just a few children from neighboring ranches. My mind needs occupation." "Agreed. In fact, there is a family about 3 miles north with 5 children who could use schooling. I know the father has been wanting someone to teach them basic letters and arithmetic. I want an equal say in decisions that affect the household and any children we may have." "Agreed. And I want your word that if this does not work, if we find we cannot build a life together, you will help me find another situation. I will not be trapped." Asher extended his hand across the table. "You have my word on all of it, Adelaide. This is a partnership, not a prison." She took his hand, feeling the calluses from years of hard work, the strength in his grip. "Then yes, I will marry you." They went to see Reverend Thomas the next morning, a kind-faced man in his 50s who had ministered to Wheatland for nearly 20 years. If he found the sudden marriage strange, he did not show it beyond a slight raising of his bushy eyebrows. "Have you two known each other long?" he asked mildly, sitting behind his desk in the small office attached to the church. "We met yesterday," Asher admitted. "But we are both certain this is what we want." Reverend Thomas turned to Adelaide. "Miss Porter, you are under no obligation here. If you are being coerced in any way, you can tell me. I will help you." "I am not being coerced," Adelaide said firmly. "This is my choice, freely made." The Reverend studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I have seen stranger marriages work out just fine, and I have seen childhood sweethearts make each other miserable. The success of a marriage depends on the people in it, not how they got there. Can you come back this afternoon at 2 o'clock? I will need time to draw up the license and arrange for witnesses." They spent the morning preparing. Asher took Adelaide to the general store and insisted on buying her a new dress for the wedding, a simple but lovely calico in deep green that brought out her eyes. He also purchased fabric for 2 more everyday dresses, undergarments, a warm shawl, sturdy boots, and a hat to protect her from the sun. "This is too much," Adelaide protested as he added a hairbrush and mirror to the growing pile. "It is not nearly enough," Asher replied. "A man should provide for his wife, and you came here with nothing through no fault of your own. Consider it a wedding gift." The shopkeeper, a plump woman named Mrs. Carson, beamed at them. "How wonderful! A wedding! I had heard you were getting married today, Asher. Let me add in some nice soap as my gift to you both. My own special lavender recipe." News really did travel faster than lightning in a small town. Adelaide wondered what people were saying about the hasty marriage, then decided she did not care. Let them gossip. She would be Mrs. Quinn by the end of the day, with a home and a future. That was more than she had dared hope for 24 hours ago. They returned to the hotel so Adelaide could change. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The green dress fit perfectly, nipping in at the waist and falling in graceful folds to her ankles. She had pinned her hair up carefully, leaving a few tendrils loose to soften her face. She looked like a bride, even if this was not the wedding she had once imagined. Asher was waiting for her in the lobby, dressed in clean black trousers and a white shirt that made his tanned skin seem even darker. He had shaved and trimmed his hair. When he saw her descending the stairs, his eyes widened. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made Adelaide's heart skip. "You clean up rather well yourself," she replied, feeling suddenly shy. They walked to the church together, Adelaide carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers that Asher had somehow procured. The afternoon sun was warm but not oppressive, and a light breeze carried the scent of prairie grass and distant pine. Reverend Thomas was waiting for them, along with 2 witnesses, the shopkeeper Mrs. Carson and her husband. The church was small and plain, with simple wooden pews and a cross carved from local pine, but sunlight streamed through the windows in golden shafts that made everything seem touched with grace. The ceremony was brief and traditional. Adelaide listened to herself making vows to a man she had known for less than a day, promising to love and honor him for the rest of her life. When Asher slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, a ring that he admitted had belonged to his mother, she felt tears prick her eyes. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Thomas said with a smile. "Asher, you may kiss your bride." Asher leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Adelaide's lips, barely more than a brush of contact, but it sent a shiver through her nonetheless. When he pulled back, his eyes were soft. "Hello, Mrs. Quinn," he said quietly. "Hello, Mr. Quinn," she replied, and just like that, Adelaide Porter ceased to exist. She was Adelaide Quinn now, a rancher's wife, bound to this man and this life. The Carsons congratulated them warmly, and Mrs. Carson pressed a basket into Adelaide's hands. "Just a few things for your supper tonight. Some cold chicken, fresh bread, butter, cheese, and a jar of my preserves. You will want something nice for your first meal as husband and wife." "Thank you," Adelaide said, touched by the kindness. "That is very generous. We take care of our own in Wheatland," Mrs. Carson said, patting her hand. "You are one of us now, dear. If you need anything at all, you just come see me at the store." After signing the marriage license and receiving a copy for their records, Asher and Adelaide walked to where his wagon was waiting outside the church. It was a sturdy farm wagon, pulled by 2 strong bay horses. Asher helped Adelaide up onto the bench seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Ready to see your new home?" he asked. Adelaide took a deep breath. "Ready." The ride out to the ranch took about 40 minutes at an easy pace. They followed a well-worn track that led away from town and into rolling grassland. Cattle dotted the landscape, fat and healthy-looking. In the distance, the mountains stood sentinel, their peaks brilliant against the blue sky. "That is the northern boundary of the property," Asher said, pointing to a line of fence posts. "The southern boundary runs along the creek you will see in a moment. 200 acres total. It is not the biggest ranch in the area, but it is good land. The grass stays green longer than most places because of the creek, and the cattle thrive." They crested a small rise, and Adelaide got her first look at the house that would be her home. It was bigger than she had expected from Asher's modest description. A solid structure built from local timber with a covered porch running along the front. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and she could see chickens scratching in the yard. "I have a hired hand, Charlie, who helps with the heavy work," Asher explained. "He usually eats dinner with me, but I told him to make himself scarce tonight. He has a room in the barn. Good kid, only 18, but he works hard." "Should we not have invited him to the wedding?" Adelaide asked. "I mentioned it, but he said he did not want to intrude. He is a bit shy. You will meet him tomorrow." Asher brought the wagon to a halt in front of the house. Before Adelaide could climb down, he was around to her side, lifting her down with easy strength. For a moment, she was acutely aware of his hands on her waist, the solid warmth of him. Then he set her gently on her feet and stepped back. "Welcome home," he said. The inside of the house was better than Adelaide had dared hope. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. A sturdy table with 4 chairs sat near the kitchen area, and there were 2 comfortable-looking armchairs positioned by the fireplace. Shelves lined the walls, holding dishes, books, and various necessities. Everything was neat and clean, if a bit sparse. "The bedroom is through here," Asher said, leading her through a doorway. "I cleaned it up this morning, put fresh sheets on the bed." The bedroom held a large bed covered with a simple quilt, a wardrobe, a dresser with a mirror and a washstand. A window looked out over the eastern fields, and Adelaide could see the sun beginning its descent toward the mountains. "It is wonderful," she said honestly. "Much more than I expected." "The third room is just storage right now, but it could be converted to another bedroom eventually," Asher continued. "And the 4th room is my office where I keep the ranch accounts and such. You are welcome to use it any time." He seemed nervous, Adelaide realized. This strong, confident man who had proposed to a stranger was now anxious about whether his home measured up. The realization made him seem more human, more real. "Asher," she said gently, "it is a lovely home, truly." He relaxed slightly. "I am glad you think so. Now, about the sleeping arrangements. I can bed down in the office tonight, give you privacy until we figure out how we want to handle things." "That is not necessary," Adelaide said, surprising herself. "We are married, properly married. It would seem strange to immediately sleep apart." "Unless you are uncomfortable with the idea." "I am not uncomfortable," Asher said carefully, "but I meant what I said yesterday. I have no expectations." "I know, but we can share a bed without that, for now, until we know each other better." Adelaide felt her cheeks burning but pressed on. "I trust you. I would not have married you if I did not." Something shifted in Asher's expression, a warmth that had not been there before. "All right, then. We will take things at whatever pace feels right to both of us." They spent the evening settling in. Adelaide unpacked her meager belongings while Asher brought in the packages from the general store. They ate the supper Mrs. Carson had packed, sitting at the table and talking easily about the ranch, the neighbors, the rhythm of life in this part of Wyoming. As darkness fell, they sat together by the fireplace, Asher in one chair and Adelaide in the other. The fire crackled pleasantly, and Adelaide felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. 24 hours ago, she had been lost and desperate. Now she sat in her own home, married to a good man, with a future that looked nothing like what she had planned but might possibly be better. "What are you thinking?" Asher asked softly. "That life is very strange," Adelaide admitted, "and that I am glad you were at the station yesterday." "So am I." He stood and offered her his hand. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow starts early on a ranch." They prepared for bed with the awkwardness of strangers sharing an intimate space. Asher left the room while Adelaide changed into the nightgown he had bought for her, soft white cotton with lace at the collar. When she was safely under the covers, she called for him to come in. He had changed into simple cotton sleep trousers and a shirt. He extinguished the lamps, leaving only the moonlight streaming through the window, then climbed into the far side of the bed, keeping a respectful distance between them. "Good night, Adelaide," he said into the darkness. "Good night, Asher." Adelaide lay awake for a long time, listening to her husband's breathing gradually slow and deepen as he fell asleep. She had expected to feel afraid or anxious, but instead she felt safe, protected. For the first time since her parents died, she felt like she might actually belong somewhere. She fell asleep with a small smile on her face, one hand resting on the ring that marked her as Adelaide Quinn. The next weeks passed in a blur of new experiences and settling into the rhythms of ranch life. Adelaide woke each morning before dawn to the sound of Asher moving quietly around the room, dressing for the day's work. At first, she stayed in bed, but after the third morning she began rising with him, learning to make coffee the way he liked it and preparing a hearty breakfast to sustain him through the morning's labor. She met Charlie, the hired hand, on her second day at the ranch. He was a gangly young man with straw-colored hair and a spray of freckles across his sunburned nose. He could barely meet Adelaide's eyes when Asher introduced them, shuffling his feet and mumbling his greetings into his chest. "Pleased to meet you, madam," he managed. "Congratulations on your marriage." "Thank you, Charlie. I hope we will become good friends." The boy's face went bright red, and he fled to the barn as soon as Asher dismissed him. Adelaide found his shyness endearing rather than off-putting. "His mother died when he was young and his father drinks," Asher explained later. "Charlie came to me last year asking for work, and I could not turn him away. He is a good kid who deserves a chance." It was just another example of the kind of man Asher was, Adelaide thought. He saw people who needed help and provided it without expectation of anything in return. He had done the same for her. She threw herself into making the house a home. The vegetable garden was resurrected under her care, and she planted late-season crops that would mature before the first frost. She cleaned and organized, mended Asher's worn clothes, and began learning to cook the hearty meals that ranch work required. Mrs. Carson proved to be a wealth of information and a good friend, always ready with advice or a recipe when Adelaide visited the store in town. True to his word, Asher introduced her to the Miller family, who lived on the neighboring ranch. They had 5 children ranging in age from 6 to 14, all of whom had never had formal schooling. Adelaide began going to their ranch 3 times a week to teach, and the joy she found in watching the children learn made her heart full. As the days turned into weeks, something subtle shifted between Adelaide and Asher. What had begun as a practical arrangement started to feel like a real partnership. They talked for hours each evening, sharing thoughts and stories, learning each other's minds. Asher had a dry sense of humor that surprised her into laughter, and he seemed to delight in making her smile. Adelaide found herself watching for him to come in from the fields, found her heart lifting at the sound of his footsteps on the porch. They still slept in the same bed, but the distance between them had gradually closed. Now they often woke to find themselves curled toward each other, hands brushing or feet tangled together. Neither of them acknowledged it during the day, but Adelaide was acutely aware of the growing tension, the unspoken question that hung in the air between them. 6 weeks into their marriage, everything changed. Adelaide had spent the morning baking bread and preparing a stew for dinner. The house was warm and fragrant, and she was humming to herself as she kneaded dough for a second batch when Asher came in earlier than usual. His face was pale beneath his tan, and he was favoring his left arm. "What happened?" Adelaide demanded, her hands going to his shoulders. "Nothing serious, just a disagreement with a fence post." "The post one," he said with a weak attempt at a smile. "Let me see." He had gashed his forearm badly, the wound deep and bleeding freely. Adelaide's teacher instincts kicked in, the calm competence she used when a child scraped a knee or bumped a head. She guided him to a chair, fetched clean water and bandages, and set about cleaning and binding the wound with steady hands. "You should have Charlie fetch the doctor," she said, wrapping the bandage snugly. "It is not that bad. You have done a fine job." Better than old Doc Wilson would have managed, and he would charge me $3 for the privilege. "Asher, this is serious. What if it becomes infected? Then we will deal with it. But right now, I am more concerned about finishing the fence repairs before the cattle wander onto Miller's land. The cattle can wait. You are hurt." He looked up at her then, something shifting in his expression. "You are worried about me. Of course I am worried about you. You are my husband." The words came out more forcefully than she intended. "Am I?" Asher asked softly. "Or am I just a man who gave you his name and a place to stay?" Adelaide froze, her hand still on his bandaged arm. "What are you asking me?" "I am asking if this is still just an arrangement to you, or if somewhere along the way it became something more." He reached up with his good hand and gently touched her cheek. "Because for me, Adelaide, it stopped being an arrangement about 2 weeks in. I did not plan for it. I did not expect it, but I have fallen in love with you." Her breath caught. "Asher, you do not have to say it back," he continued quickly. "I know we agreed this would be a partnership, nothing more, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel. Every morning I wake up next to you. Every evening I come home to you. You have made this house into a home, made my life into something worth living. I love you, and I needed you to know that." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears. "You foolish man. I have been in love with you for weeks. I just did not think you wanted to hear it." The joy that transformed his face was like watching the sun break through clouds. "You love me." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I love you. How could I not? You are kind and generous and hardworking. You make me laugh. You respect my mind. You gave me everything when I had nothing, and you never once made me feel like I owed you for it. I love you so much it terrifies me." Asher stood, pulling her into his arms despite his injured arm. He kissed her then, not the gentle brush of their wedding day, but a real kiss, deep and passionate and full of all the feelings they had been holding back. Adelaide melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Asher rested his forehead against hers. "I want this to be a real marriage, Adelaide, in every way, if you are ready. If you want that." "I want that," she whispered. "I want you." He kissed her again, softer this time, then swept her up into his arms, making her squeal with surprise and laughter. "Your arm," she protested. "Is fine," he assured her, carrying her toward the bedroom. "I could be missing both arms and I would still find a way to carry my wife to bed." What happened next was private and tender and beautiful, a true joining that transformed their practical marriage into a love match. Afterward, lying in Asher's arms with the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, Adelaide felt complete in a way she never had before. "I was so angry at Thomas Whitmore," she said softly, tracing patterns on Asher's chest. "For abandoning me, for making me feel foolish and small. But now I think I should thank him. If he had actually shown up, I never would have met you." "I was planning to go into town that day to pick up supplies," Asher said, running his fingers through her loose hair. "But one of the horses threw a shoe and I had to wait for Charlie to fix it. I almost sent him into town without me, but something told me to go myself. I am glad I listened." "Do you think it was fate?" Adelaide asked. "Do you think we were meant to find each other?" "I think we were two people who needed each other and were smart enough to recognize it when the opportunity came," Asher said. "But if you want to call that fate, I would not argue." They stayed in bed until the sun was setting, talking and touching, learning each other in new ways. When they finally rose and dressed, Adelaide felt like a different person than the one who had woken that morning. She was truly married now, truly loved. The future stretched out before them, bright with possibility. Over the following months, their love deepened and grew. Adelaide continued teaching the Miller children and took on 2 more students from another neighboring family. Asher expanded his herd and began breeding horses in earnest, developing a reputation for quality stock. Together, they made improvements to the house, adding curtains and rugs, refinishing furniture, creating a space that reflected both of their personalities. When winter came, harsh and unforgiving, they huddled together by the fire in the evenings. Asher taught Adelaide to play chess, and she taught him poetry, reading aloud from a book of Wordsworth that had belonged to her mother. Charlie joined them sometimes, slowly coming out of his shell under Adelaide's gentle encouragement. She discovered he had a beautiful singing voice and convinced him to perform for them on Christmas Eve, his clear tenor filling the house with carols. Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle calved successfully, and 3 of the mares delivered healthy foals. The garden flourished under Adelaide's care, providing fresh vegetables for their table. And Adelaide discovered she was carrying a child. She had suspected for a few weeks before she was certain, her monthly courses stopping and a persistent queasiness plaguing her mornings. When she finally told Asher, sitting him down at the table with trembling hands, he went absolutely still. "A baby," he said, his voice strange. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes." "Are you happy?" Adelaide searched his face anxiously. They had talked about children in abstract terms, but the reality was different from the theory. Asher let out a whoop of joy that startled her, then pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. "Happy, Adelaide, I am beyond happy. I am ecstatic. We are going to have a family. A real family." His joy was infectious, and Adelaide found herself laughing and crying at the same time. They were going to be parents. This life they had built together was going to expand to include a child, a person who would be part of both of them. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Adelaide continued her activities, including teaching, until she grew too large and uncomfortable to make the ride to the Miller Ranch. Mrs. Carson proved to be a fount of advice, having raised 6 children of her own. She helped Adelaide prepare by sewing tiny gowns and blankets, setting up a cradle that Charlie built with surprising skill. Asher was simultaneously excited and terrified. He fretted over Adelaide constantly, worried she was doing too much, eating too little, working too hard. She found his concern both touching and occasionally exasperating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she reminded him when he insisted she sit down while he prepared dinner for the third night in a row. "I know, but what if something happens? What if I do something wrong? Then we will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else," Adelaide said, pulling him down to sit beside her. "You are going to be a wonderful father, Asher. I have no doubts about that." Their son was born on a cold November night, coming fast and furious after Adelaide's water broke during supper. Mrs. Carson barely made it to the ranch in time to assist, and Asher paced the kitchen like a caged animal, listening to his wife's labor cries with a pale face and clenched fists. "First babies usually take forever," Mrs. Carson had assured him. "You will likely be up all night." But their son had other ideas. 3 hours after labor began, Adelaide delivered a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. When Mrs. Carson placed the squalling infant in Asher's arms, the big rancher looked down at his son with wonder written all over his face. "He is perfect," Asher whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Adelaide, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Aaron after Asher's father. Baby Aaron was a good-natured child who nursed well and slept in manageable stretches. Asher proved to be a doting father, getting up in the night to change diapers and walking the floor with Aaron when he was fussy, singing cowboy songs in his deep voice until the baby settled. Charlie was terrified of the infant at first, afraid he would break him, but Adelaide gently insisted he hold Aaron. The sight of the gangly young man carefully cradling the tiny baby brought tears to her eyes. They were a family, she thought. Not a conventional one, perhaps, but a family nonetheless. The years that followed were full and happy. Aaron grew from infant to toddler to an energetic little boy who followed his father everywhere, mimicking his walk and his speech. When Aaron was 3, Adelaide gave birth to a daughter they named Alice, a serene baby with Adelaide's green eyes and Asher's smile. 2 years after that came another boy, Andrew, who was as rambunctious as Aaron had been calm. The ranch prospered. Asher's reputation for quality horses spread throughout Wyoming and into neighboring territories. They added to their acreage, built a larger barn, and hired 2 more hands to help Charlie manage the expanded operation. Adelaide opened a small school on the ranch, teaching not only their own children but a dozen others from the surrounding area. The territorial government even began paying her a small salary, recognition of the valuable service she provided. Charlie grew from shy boy to confident young man under their care. When he turned 21, Asher made him foreman of the ranch, a position he filled with dedication and skill. He eventually married a sweet girl named Sarah who worked at the general store, and Adelaide cried happy tears at their wedding, remembering the scared 18-year-old who could barely look her in the eye through it all. Adelaide and Asher's love only deepened. They had built something remarkable together, a life that was rich not in material wealth, but in the things that truly mattered: family, community, purpose. On warm evenings, they would sit on the porch after the children were asleep, Asher's arm around Adelaide's shoulders, watching the sun set over the mountains. "You ever think about that day at the station?" Asher asked one evening when they had been married nearly 10 years. "Sometimes," Adelaide admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else." "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one." She turned to look at her husband, at the face that had become dearer to her than her own. You gave me everything, Asher, a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me your name and with it a new life. You gave me just as much, Asher said softly. I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You made everything mean something. You made me believe in love, in family, in the future. We saved each other, Adelaide said. I suppose we did. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear the children settling down for bed, Alice singing a lullaby to her doll while Aaron read to Andrew from a book of fairy tales. Normal sounds. Beautiful sounds. Adelaide thought about the frightened woman she had been, standing alone on that platform with nothing but a carpet bag and shattered dreams. She had felt so lost, so hopeless. If someone had told her then that she would find love, happiness, and a family beyond her wildest imaginings, she never would have believed it. But life had a way of surprising you. Sometimes the worst moments led to the best outcomes. Sometimes a stranger with kind eyes could become the love of your life. Sometimes taking a leap of faith could lead you exactly where you were meant to be. What are you thinking about? Asher asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. How lucky I am, Adelaide said simply. How blessed. We both are. As they sat together under the vast Wyoming sky, Adelaide felt profound gratitude for the twisting path that had brought her here. She had been left at the station with nothing, abandoned and alone, and a cowboy had given her everything, including his name and his heart. It was, she thought, the best trade she had ever made. The children grew, as children do, each developing their own distinct personalities. Aaron was serious and thoughtful, showing an aptitude for the ranch work that made Asher's chest swell with pride. He could gentle a skittish horse with patience and calm that belied his young years. Alice inherited her mother's love of learning and could often be found curled up with a book, reading far above her grade level. Andrew was the wild one, always getting into scrapes and adventures, keeping Adelaide on her toes. When Aaron was 12, Alice 9, and Andrew 7, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the others, leaving her exhausted and sick for months. Asher hired a woman from town to help with the housework and cooking, insisting Adelaide rest as much as possible. We are not as young as we were with Aaron, he said gently, when Adelaide protested the expense. Let someone else do the heavy work. Their fourth child, a daughter they named Amelia, arrived during a spring rainstorm. The labor was long and difficult, and for a few terrifying hours the midwife was worried they might lose either mother or baby or both. But Adelaide was strong, and Amelia was a fighter. When the baby finally arrived, small but healthy, Asher held his wife's hand and thanked God for sparing them both. No more, he said firmly, looking at their newborn daughter. I love our children, but I am not risking you again. Agreed, Adelaide said weakly, too exhausted to argue. At 36, with 4 healthy children, she was content to be done with childbearing. Amelia proved to be worth the difficult pregnancy. She was a sunny, happy baby who rarely cried and seemed to find joy in everything. As she grew, she became the heart of the family, the one who could make everyone laugh and brought them together. The Quinn family became a fixture in the Wheatland community. Adelaide's school had grown to nearly 20 students, and the territorial government had funded the construction of a proper schoolhouse on their property. Asher served on the town council and helped organize the annual cattle drive that had become a major economic event for the region. They were respected, valued members of the community, a far cry from the desperate woman and the bachelor rancher who had made a hasty marriage a decade before. Not everything was perfect, of course. There were hard years when drought threatened the cattle, when illness swept through the territory, when money was tight. There were disagreements between Adelaide and Asher, normal friction that came from two strong-willed people sharing a life. But they had learned to communicate, to compromise, to remember that they were on the same team. One particularly difficult period came when Aaron was 16. He had grown tall and strong, looking so much like his father that it sometimes took Adelaide's breath away. He worked the ranch alongside Asher and Charlie, doing a man's work, and he had begun noticing girls in town. One girl in particular, the daughter of a wealthy ranch owner, had caught his eye. The problem was that the girl's father, a man named Robert Sterling, was a rival of Asher's. They had been competing for contracts and grazing rights for years, and Sterling made no secret of his disdain for Asher, whom he considered beneath him socially. When Sterling found out his daughter Catherine was sweet on Asher Quinn, he forbade her from seeing him. Aaron was heartbroken and angry, and the house was tense with his teenage frustration. "It is not fair," Aaron raged one evening after returning from town. "He does not even know me. He just hates you, and so he hates me too." "Life is not fair," Asher said quietly. "I learned that young. But you will get through this." "I love her," Aaron said, his voice breaking, "and she loves me." Adelaide's heart ached for her son. She remembered being young and feeling like every emotion was life or death, every setback the end of the world. "Then if it is real love, it will find a way," she said gently. "But you are both very young. Do not make decisions now that will affect the rest of your life." It took nearly 2 years for the situation to resolve. Catherine Sterling proved to be as stubborn as Aaron, and she refused to give him up despite her father's demands. She even came to the Quinn Ranch to ask Adelaide to teach her privately, since her father had withdrawn her from the school to keep her away from Aaron. Adelaide admired the girl's spirit and agreed to teach her. Over months of lessons, she got to know Catherine and found her to be intelligent, determined, and genuinely in love with Aaron. When Catherine turned 18, she confronted her father with an ultimatum: accept Aaron or lose her entirely. Robert Sterling was not happy, but he loved his daughter enough to bend. He grudgingly allowed Aaron to court Catherine properly, though he made it clear he still did not approve. But as he got to know Aaron, watched him work hard and treat his daughter with respect, his opinion began to soften. Aaron and Catherine were married when he was 20, and she was 19, in a wedding that brought together two rival families and began healing old wounds. Adelaide cried through the entire ceremony, watching her firstborn son become a husband, remembering the tiny baby she had held in her arms what felt like moments ago. "That was us once," Asher whispered to her, holding her hand as they watched Aaron and Catherine exchange vows. "We were much quicker about it," Adelaide whispered back, making him chuckle. The years continued their relentless march forward. Alice surprised everyone by deciding she wanted to be a doctor, not a common aspiration for a young woman in Wyoming in the 1890s. But she was determined, and Adelaide and Asher supported her dream. They sent her to a women's medical college in the East, sacrificing to afford the tuition, and she returned 4 years later as Dr. Asher Quinn, ready to serve the community that had raised her. Andrew followed his love of horses and became a renowned horse trainer, traveling throughout the West to work with difficult animals. He married a rancher's daughter from Montana and settled there, though he visited often. Amelia, true to her nature, became a teacher like her mother, taking over the school when Adelaide decided to retire at 55. She married a quiet farmer and stayed close to home, giving Adelaide and Asher the joy of watching their grandchildren grow up nearby. Aaron and Catherine had 3 children and took over an increasing share of the ranch operations as Asher aged. Charlie, now in his 40s with children of his own, remained foreman, a loyal friend who had become family in all but blood. When Asher and Adelaide celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole community turned out for a party at the ranch. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, speeches and toasts. As Adelaide looked around at the crowd, at children and grandchildren, friends and neighbors, the community they had built, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What is on your mind?" Asher asked, pulling her into his arms for a dance despite his protesting knees. "I am thinking about how much has changed since that day at the station," Adelaide said. "I was so lost, so alone, I thought my life was over. And instead, it was just beginning. Because of you, because you saw someone in need and helped without expecting anything in return." Asher smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling in the way she loved. "I expected something. I expected a wife to help me run this ranch and maybe give me someone to talk to over dinner. I never expected to fall head over heels in love. I never expected to build this incredible life." "We built it together," Adelaide corrected. "Yes, we did, and I would not change a single moment of it." They danced until the sun set, surrounded by the people they loved in the home they had built together. It was, Adelaide thought, about as close to perfect as life could get. The final years of their life together were gentle ones. Asher retired from active ranch work at 60, turning over full control to Aaron while he and Adelaide enjoyed a slower pace. They traveled a bit, visiting Andrew in Montana and Alice in Denver, where she had established a practice. They spent long hours on the porch, reading and talking, watching their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once run. Asher's health began to decline when he was 67. His heart was failing, the doctor said, worn out from years of hard work. There was nothing to be done but make him comfortable. He faced his mortality with the same quiet courage he had faced everything else in life. "I do not want you to grieve too long," he told Adelaide one afternoon as they sat together in their bedroom. "Promise me you will keep living, keep finding joy." "How can I when you are half my heart?" Adelaide asked, tears streaming down her face. "Because you are strong, the strongest person I have ever known, and because our children and grandchildren need you." He squeezed her hand. "I have had a wonderful life, Adelaide, more than I ever dreamed possible. I got 42 years with you, 4 incredible children, more grandchildren than I can count. I got to build something lasting. Not many men can say that." "It is not enough time," Adelaide said. "I wanted to grow old with you. We did grow old together. Look at us, all gray and wrinkled," he smiled. "I love you, Adelaide Quinn. I loved you from the moment I saw you standing on that platform looking so brave even though you were terrified. I will love you until my last breath, and if there is anything after, I will love you there too." Asher Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 days later with Adelaide holding his hand. The funeral was the largest Wheatland had ever seen, a testament to the man he had been and the lives he had touched. Adelaide stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren, accepting condolences from what seemed like half of Wyoming. In the weeks that followed, she learned to navigate grief. It was not her first experience with loss, but this was different. Asher had been her partner, her love, her best friend. Half of her was missing, and she had to figure out how to live as an incomplete whole. But she had promised him she would keep living, and Adelaide Quinn had never broken a promise to her husband. She threw herself into her grandchildren, teaching them to read and garden and cook. She helped Amelia with the school. She organized community events and knitted blankets for every new baby born in the county. And every evening, she sat on the porch in the chair next to Asher's empty one and talked to him, telling him about her day, about the children and grandchildren, about the ranch. Sometimes she could almost feel him there, almost hear his voice responding. Adelaide lived to the age of 79, active and engaged right up until the end. She passed away surrounded by family, including 8 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. Her last words were a smile and a whisper. "I see you, Asher. I am coming home." They buried her next to Asher on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under a large oak tree they had planted together 40 years before. The gravestone reads simply, "Adelaide Quinn, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and teacher. She gave everything, including her heart." The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations. Aaron's grandson eventually sold it to a conservation trust, ensuring the land would be protected forever. But the schoolhouse Adelaide built still stands, now a museum dedicated to her memory and the history of education in Wyoming. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun sets over the mountains, people say you can see 2 figures sitting on that hillside near the oak tree, hands clasped, watching over the land they loved. Just a trick of the light, of course. But it is a nice thought, the idea that some loves are too strong for even death to part. The story of Adelaide and Asher Quinn became something of a legend in Wheatland. It was the story people told when they needed to believe in second chances, in the possibility that life could surprise you in the best possible ways. It was the story of a woman who had nothing and a man who gave her everything, including his name, and how together they built something that lasted far beyond their years. It was, simply put, a love story for the ages. The kind that reminded people that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that real love is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about 2 people choosing each other every single day, building a life together one moment at a time, and creating something beautiful from the rubble of shattered dreams. Adelaide had stood on that station platform with nothing, abandoned and alone. And Asher had seen her, truly seen her, and offered her not just rescue but partnership. Together, they had created a family, a home, a legacy. They had loved deeply and well, through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow. Their story was proof that it only takes one person, one moment, one leap of faith to change everything. That love can be found in the most unlikely places, with the most unlikely people. That sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best years of your life. And that, in the end, is what matters most. Not how your story begins, but how you write it together, and the love you leave behind when it ends.